What up, YouTube? T-Movies here. Now, with the new Netflix film The Two Popes premiering this week, I decided to go ahead and do my top 10 favorite Anthony Hopkins movies. I mean, he's of course won an Oscar, he's been in some countless classic stuff. He's also been in some duds, but he's done a lot of interesting films over the years. And I mean, of course, he was knighted, so I guess you could call him Sir Anthony Hopkins now. I mean, he's been in the entertainment business for like decades and decades, and who just doesn't love Anthony Hopkins? And he has a really cool voice too. So, with that being said, here's my 10 favorite Anthony Hopkins movies. All right. Coming in at number 10, it is the film The Edge. Now, it stars Anthony Hopkins, who plays Charles Morse, who's this billionaire, who has who doesn't really have much waters experience, and so like with the help of this survivor guy and a photographic memory, and you got Alec Baldwin who plays his co-star in this named Bob Green, who's this photographer who ends up being stranded alongside Boss, and he's actually applying to kill Moss, as well as stealing his wife and his fortune, and it's directed by this director named Lee Tamahori, who did a pretty good job at directing this film. Anthony Hopkins and Alec Baldwin both had interesting chemistry with each other. It has some really witty, cool dialogue in this. It gets really intense at times. There's even a grizzly bear in this. I mean, The Edge is a really interesting film about survival and all that. And if you guys haven't really seen The Edge, go check it out. I mean, Hopkins really showed his skill in this. Alright, coming in at number 9, it is Remains of the Day. Now, this movie ended up coming out like a year after the film Harrow's End got released. And in it, also reteamed Hopkins with Emma Thompson, who 1 year earlier did Harrow's End together. And here you got Hopkins, who plays James Stevens, who's this head butler of a Darlington house, and you got Christopher Reeve, who plays the American congressman whose house ends up being sold to, and you got Emma Thompson, who plays Miss Kenton, who's this former colleague and romantic interest in to Hopkins' character. And this has great chemistry between Hopkins and Thompson. Christopher Reeve was pretty decent in this. It's directed by James Ivory, who of course wrote the script for Call Me by Your Name. Really did a good job with that one. It's a really nice period piece flick. Hopkins at his really up his game here. I mean, he's no stranger for period piece stuff, and he was really great in this. I mean, if you guys haven't really seen The Remains of the Day yet, it's a really good one. Alright, coming in at number 8, it is The Mask of Zorro. Now this actually stars Hopkins as the main villain in this, named Don Diego de la Vega. And of course you got Antonio Banderas, who plays the new Zorro, Alejandro Marietta. And you got Stuart Wilson, Catherine Zeta-Jones. I mean, Hopkins in this, of course, he ends up being imprisoned for 20. The character of Don, who ended up becoming Zorro, ended up being imprisoned for 20 years, but he ends up receiving word that like his old enemy, Don Rafael Materia, played by Stuart Wilson, ends up returning, and he ends up, and I messed up, he didn't play the villain, but he ends up training the Alejandro character, played by Banderas, to be his successor. So I guess it's been a while since I've seen Max Zorro, but really, Hopkins plays like Banderas' mentor, and just think, Banderas and Hopkins might actually get an Oscar nomination this year. So just that's pretty cool right there. But yeah, Max Zorro, I gotta rewatch this movie again. It's a really fun, entertaining flick. Anthony Hopkins playing the mentor to Banderas is pretty cool to watch. I mean, if you guys haven't really seen the Max Zorro yet, it's a really good one. Coming in at number 7, it is Steven Spielberg's Amistad. Now it stars Hopkins as famed as former President John Quincy Adams, and it does take place in 1839, and the slave ship named Amistad ends up setting sail from Cuba to America, and so like during the long trip, Syndicate, played by John Hansu, ends up leaving the slaves in a unprecedented uprising. And so you got Morgan Freeman, who plays the freed slave Theodore Jolson, who wants Click and like the others exonerated, and ends up recruiting this lawyer named Roger Barber, played by Matthew McConaughey. And John Quincy Adams also becomes the ally here as well. Hopkins, of course, he's no stranger for playing the president. I mean, he's of course played the president a couple times, and I mean he was pretty good as John Quincy Adams. And lots of people always call Amistad Steven Spielberg's best work. I don't think it's his best work or anything, but it's still really good. It's a really great historical epic. Great performances by John Hanson, by Matthew McConaughey. Morgan Freeman was great. Hopkins really stole lots of scenes as John Quincy Adams. This movie gets pretty intense at times. I mean, if you guys haven't really seen Amistad, it's a really magnificent movie. Alright. Coming in at number 6, it is Dora. Now, of course, here you've got Anthony Hopkins, who plays Odin, who's the dad of Dora and Loki. And of course, Chris Hemsworth plays Thor, while Tom Hiddleston does a great job as Loki. And Dora, like I really quite like Hopkins in Dora. I mean, it's kind of pretty cool to see Hopkins, like an iconic actor like Hopkins, get his hands into the comic book genre. And Hopkins, of course, he ended up playing Odin in Dora, as well as Dora the Dark World, and Dora Ragnarok, and he did a great job in all 3 Dora movies. Maybe he'll return for Dora Love and Thunder. I'm not 100% sure. But still, Hopkins as Odin, that was really brilliant casting. I mean, whoever cast Hopkins as Odin, I mean, he doesn't really have that big of scenes or anything, but he still did a great job. And of course, you got Renee Russo as Odin's wife. I mean, yeah, I'm hoping we'll see. Obviously, Odin end up, spoiler, but Odin ends up dying. So maybe he'll return as Odin in flashbacks for the 4th one. Who knows? But yeah, Anthony Hopkins was that was really brilliant at casting him as Odin. All right, coming in at number 5, it is The Elephant Man. Now, this film was directed by David Lynch, and was a follow-up to his directing debut, Eraserhead. And this film is a biopic about Joseph Merrick, who's the man who was physically deformity, immortalized him as the Elephant Man. And John Hurt, of course, plays the role of Merrick, and I really liked John Hurt as that role. I mean, I think it's definitely his best work he's ever done. And you also have Anthony Hopkins, who plays the role of Dr. Trees, who's the surgeon who took in Merrick and allow him to live more comfortable and humane existence at a London hospital. And they become a really interesting. They end up having a bond with one another. Yeah, John Hurt, Anthony Hopkins both had great on-screen chemistry. It's probably one of David Lynch's best work. It's a really terrific movie. I mean, the makeup they used on John Hurt was pretty great. Is to say that this is based on a true story, but yeah, if you guys haven't really seen The Elephant, definitely give it a shot. All right, coming in at number 4, it is Nixon. Now, John Quincy Adams isn't the only president that Hopkins ended up playing. He also portrayed Richard Nixon in the Oliver Stone film Nixon. And I mean, Anthony Hopkins in Nixon was brilliant casting. I really thought he played that president very well. Joan Allen played his on-screen wife. Joan Allen was terrific. And of course, the movie takes you know focuses on the it mainly focuses on Nixon's like a personal and professional life, touching on his youth, college years, failures, of course the Watergate scandal. You also had Bob Hoskins as J. Edgar Hoover. James Woods was in this. Mary Steenburgen, Ed Harris, Paris Booth, David Hyde Pierce, J.T. Walsh. Really great cast. I mean, really terrific film. Hopkins, I believe he's got an Oscar nomination for this, if I'm not mistaken. I could probably be wrong there. But yeah, Nixon is a really good film. If you guys haven't really seen Nixon, give it a go. I mean, Oliver Stone is pretty good when it comes to like political based movies, and Nixon really showed it. Coming in at number 3, it is The World's Fastest Indian. Now, the film stars Hopkins as this as like this motorcycle rider named Burt Monroe, who has been like working on increasing the speed of his motorcycle, and and of course it takes place at 1920s India, and he like ends up dreaming of taking it to Bonneville, start Flash to see how fast it goes, and so like by the early 60s, heart disease ends up during his life, and so he ends up, taking a boat to LA to buy a car, but like builds this makeshift trailer and gets like the Indian through customs and heads for like Utah now. And Hopkins was really great in this. It was also directed by Roger Donaldson, who did a great job at directing. You had Greenwood, Walter Goggins, Diane Ladd. Of course, this ends up talking about his life, from life to death. And Hopkins, really played this role perfectly. I mean, not to mention along the way, Burt ends up, meeting some interesting people that he ends up being charmed by, and he ends up being, very friendly with them, and it's pretty good. I mean, if you guys haven't really seen The World's Fastest Indian, it's a really good film that Hopkins appeared in. All right, number 2 goes to Hitchcock. Now, Hitchcock stars Anthony Hopkins as a famed director, Alfred Hitchcock, who also gave us, of course, Psycho. And this is a movie about the making of Psycho. And Hitchcock is magnificent. I mean, Anthony Hopkins as the role of Alfred Hitchcock, that was brilliant casting. He really embodied the role of Alfred Hitchcock. Like he talked like Alfred Hitchcock. It literally looks like the director went back in time, got Alfred Hitchcock, and got him in the. That's really what it looked like. And you also had Helen Mirren as his on-screen wife. You also had Jessica Biel as Psycho star Vera Mills. Scarlett Johansson played Psycho star Janet Leigh. You also had Michael Steinberg, who did a great job at playing a famed killer, Ed Gein. And you also had Toni Collette. Ralph Macchio was in this. It is also based on this film is also based on a book, I believe. There's that too, and yeah, I mean, it was pretty cool seeing the craziest and making of the 60s classic Psycho, and yeah, it was directed by this director named Sasha. I can't remember his last name, but he just directed that Peter Dinklage movie. I Dinner with Hervey. He's a pretty cool director there. And Hopkins and Helen Mirren's chemistry together is just off-putting. I mean, if you guys haven't really seen the 2012 movie Hitchcock yet, it's a really great one. And I'm still surprised Hopkins did not get an Oscar nomination for this. It was that great in this movie. Alright, now, what is Hopkins' best work? Obviously, the best work that Hopkins ever done is the one that won him his Oscar. Number one obviously goes to The Silence of the Lambs. I mean, his best work ever is and will always be as Hannibal Lecter. No matter what roles he plays, no matter if it's no matter if it's Hitchcock, no matter if it's The Edge or whatever, his best work will always be Silence of the Lambs. I mean, he played Hannibal Lecter in loads of other stuff like Hannibal, Red Dragon. Obviously, it was Silence of the Lambs, which I believe won Best Picture. I gotta double check that, but and of course the movie won Hopkins his first ever Oscar. Jodie Foster ended up winning her Oscar for this film. Jonathan Demme did a great job with this. You also had Ted Levine as Buffalo Bill. Put the lotion on his skin and get the hose again. I mean, classic. You got Scott Glenn here. I mean, Hopkins played the very creepiness of Hannibal Lecter very well. The creepy eyes was really insane. The movie is based on a book. It gets very creepy. It gets very terrifying. It's very suspenseful. It kind of feels like an Alfred Hitchcock movie at times. But yeah, Silence of the Lambs is such a great movie. I mean, it is of course one of the best thrillers of the '90s. Great performance all around. I mean, also not to mention the interview that Jodie Foster is giving to that Jodie Foster character FBI character has with Hannibal Lecter is pretty iconic. I mean, this is definitely the best potential role of Hopkins. And it would be cool to see him as Hannibal Lecter again, but to be honest, in other Hannibal movies that got released after this, Hannibal, Red Dragon, were not all that great. So yeah, but Silence of the Lambs is definitely Hopkins' best work. If you guys haven't really seen Silence of the Lambs yet, give it a shot. It's definitely one of the most terrifying movies you'll see in the '90s. I never really consider it as a horror film per se, but it's more very suspenseful than just a straight horror. So anyway, that's pretty much it. Let me do the quick rundown. 10, The Edge. 9, Remains of the Day. 8, The Mask. 7, Amistad. 6, Dora. 5, The Elephant Man. 4, Nixon. 3, The World's Fastest Indian. 2, Hitchcock. And 1 is Silence of the Lambs. Now, he's been in loads of other stuff over the years. Let me pull up his credit. He was in that Ryan Gosling movie, Fracture. Of course, Meet Joe Black with Brad Pitt. He was also he worked with Brad Pitt in another movie called Legend of the Falls. There's that. He was in that not so good movie Solace with Colin Farrell. He was in Bram Stoker's Dracula. He was in that horrible horror movie The Right. He gave one of the worst performances of his career in Transformers: The Last Night. He also gave another performance in that Nicholas Hoult movie Collide. So not everything he's been in is what you call the best. He was in the aforementioned Howard's, and he was in his first feature was Lion in the Winter. He was in The Wolfman. He was in Beowulf, King Lear, Hearts in Atlanta with the late Anton Yelchin, A Bridge Too Far. He was in the Red sequel, Instant Magic, Bad Company that paired him with Chris Rock. That was kind of a weird combo, but it kind of worked pretty well. You will be a Tour Dog Stranger, Misconduct with Al Pacino. He was in that horrible Kidnapping Mr. Heineken. I mean, he's been in some good stuff, and he's also been in some not so good stuff. So, yeah. I'm actually looking forward to checking out the Cheap Hopes, though. Anyway, let me ask you guys, what are some of your favorite Anthony Hopkins movies? Drop comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, hit that bell for more notifications. This here is C Movie signing off.